I'm John Dennis. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
We have the most beautiful state and one of the most beautiful places in the world, and people are leaving.
I'm gonna catch you when all the cameras aren't around, and I'm gonna you up. I'm tired.
He's the chairman of the San Francisco GOP, and he's running against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Step back, everyone.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? John Dennis Report. Thanks for joining. Great to have you today. I just saw a funny tweet by Tim Dillon, so that's a nice way to start the show. So anyway, thanks for joining us. It's Tuesday, April 13th in 2021. And a lot's going on today. We were just sort of kicking around what we're going to cover. And, of course, there's some big news, one that affects me sort of directly. As some of you know, I was really ambivalent about getting this shot. I was thinking, the vaccine for COVID. And I was ambivalent about it because, my dad died of it, and I know another guy who's about my age who died of it in February. But I'm not a big fan of getting vaccines. I'm one of these guys who doesn't get the flu shot because, I don't know, I think you're just not necessary. Just deal with the flu, get the flu, get over it. But in any event, I thought in the end, let's give it a try. So guess which vaccine I got? I got the Johnson & Johnson one. And of course, not long after, on Sunday, this past Sunday, my wife got the Johnson & Johnson one. So she just called me in a bit of a tizzy about it. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's really not much obviously we can do about it at this point. And my concern about it was, well, by the way, for those of you who aren't aware of it, let's go ahead and put the article up there, Mario. Yeah, do the journal one. No, not that one. The one in the journal. So at the very end. Yeah. So, so here's the interesting thing. The FDA and the CDC called for a pause in distribution and usage of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is the one-shot vaccine, as opposed to the approved Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, which are two shots. You got to get one, and then you got to go back a few weeks later and then get the second one. Johnson & Johnson has another advantage, aside from being just a one-shot, in that it doesn't require the refrigeration that both the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines do. So that doesn't look like, you can't really see the whole thing there. Can we? I don't know. Maybe move it to my other side, and then can we move the picture-in-picture, and then sort of widen that screen a little bit? Okay, thanks. So in any event, but I think that the Johnson & Johnson one was a little more popular. I got a kind of a theory about that. Well, first of all, I think it was popular on the distribution side because of it doesn't require refrigeration the way the others do. I think you need actually special refrigerators for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Also, I think, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer is a drug company where you have to get prescription drugs, but Johnson & Johnson is not only a pharmaceutical company, but it's a products company. I mean, people have Johnson & Johnson baby oil in their house. They have Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo in their house. And so I think the fact that it was a one shot and people are comfortable with the Johnson & Johnson name, at least in the U.S., made it a more popular choice. And so that was, that's the reason why I went with it, because it also because it used sort of the old technology, the way vaccines have been administered, and their medical effects have been, monitored for 100 years, whereas the Pfizer and the Moderna technology has been around for a while, but it hasn't been as tested and therefore not as tried and true as the Johnson & Johnson technology. So here are the numbers right now. There have been 6 million doses, and 6 million doses administered. And of those 6 million doses administered, there have been 6 problems with blood clotting, all in women. And of those 6 problems with blood clotting, there's been 1 death. So there have been 6 problems in 6 million doses administered, 1 in a million. And the death was 1 in 6 million. So I don't know. It still seems pretty safe to me. And I wonder what's happening here. We're at the stage in our history where our institutions have lost trust. I think it's safe to say that almost all of our institutions are fairly untrustworthy. And so you have to ask the question, especially when an operation like this is tied into the government, which has its own, political agenda. You have to wonder what's going on here. Okay, listen, 6 blood clotting incidents. You got to be careful. You have to be aware. It's this product, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, has not been distributed as widely as the Moderna and the Pfizer one. But I think like I said before, I think it's more popular and more sought after. And meanwhile, Moderna and Pfizer have investments in the production of their vaccines. So they want to distribute them. They want people to use them because they don't want to get stuck with them, So, there has been no, and this is a little unfair to say on the one hand, but I'll follow up with it. So there's no causal relationship right now. There's the statistic, or there is the confirmed incidence of problems with blood clotting, but there's no causal relationship has been established between the administration of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and and blood clotting. Now, that's a little unfair to point that out because it's too soon to say that it's too soon. You can't test. It's hard to test the causal relationship when the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has only been administered for less like a month or something like that. On the flip side, are we being told of all the problems that are coming from the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines? Again, we have to take into consideration these days the political angle on all this. Now, it's interesting because Ron DeSantis has assured people. I think he got the J&J shot. He has assured people that it's not a problem. They've administered a ton of shots, I think more than anybody else per capita in the United States in Florida. Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida. And then just as before we were about to go on, I caught the statement by none other than Donald Trump, who does suggest openly that there could be a political motivation for the FDA and the CDC to halt the administration of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And he suggests that the FDA and the CDC love Pfizer. That Pfizer has undue influence and a better relationship with the FDA and the CDC than Johnson & Johnson does. And so, there's Trump throwing in his 2 cents, and he sort of knows. He said, he didn't have a great relationship with the FDA because he pushed them. He pushed them for a right to try. He pushed them for other policies with which they were unhappy. He pushed them to accelerate the approval of the vaccines, and so they're not fans of his, and so he's not a fan of theirs, and he's pointing out what I think a lot of people would have noticed anyway, but pretty firmly. So all those things have to be taken into consideration. And then last and not least, one other point I want to leave you with on this is that my wife listens frequently to Steve Bannon's show, War Room Pandemic, and they had a segment on there that completely flipped her out and freaked her out about this. And there was a guy on there making claims that this technology could lead to long-term consequences and long-term problems. And I just want to say that I had to say, listen, I don't know this guy. I don't know what his agenda is. He could be 100% right, but I very strongly doubt that this guy, whoever he was, the guest on Bannon and Kasim this morning, I really seriously doubt he can predict the future. And so with that said, I am not going to worry about this for 1 nanosecond. I'm moving forward. If someone comes up and says, hey, there is a potential problem, and here are prospective therapies that you can take or things that you can do to mitigate the risk that you got from having the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, fine. I will listen to those people. But those kinds of suggestions notwithstanding, I'm not listening to this anymore. If somebody comes up with a causal relationship and says that this is more likely to happen and we have ways of you reducing your risk, then that's what I'll listen to. Other than that, I think I'm shutting this story down. I'm really not going to pay attention to it because I just don't see the point, frankly. And the fact that it is so high profile and that they took this unusual step to stop the administration of it, you just have to wonder. It has, as someone who's been around politics for a little while, this one has the scent of politics. But let's leave it at that for now. And maybe we'll revisit this topic if something newsworthy comes up, in coming days or weeks. Okay, moving on. The other big story out there, the one that we are, talking about, we talked about yesterday, is the riots and the troubles that we're running into in Washington D.C. in Minneapolis, based on the shooting of Daunte Watson by a female police officer in the town of Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. It was a terrible thing, unfortunate thing. Daunte Wright was a young man who had a daughter, and it's unfortunate and terrible thing, terrible tragedy. Now I'm going to say some things, and I'm going to circle back to them. Sorry to use that phrase, but I'm going to come back to them because I don't want anything that I'm about to suggest to insinuate that Mr. Wright deserved what happened to him. Now, they're going to put out pictures of him holding his daughter in a sweet way, but the reality is that Mr. Wright, go ahead and you can put that up. Mr. Wright had Facebook postings that showed that he was engaged in some bad stuff. So here he is holding up, wads of money. There were other photos of him on his Facebook page that showed him using drugs, and apparently he was in the drug trade. And there were other pictures of him, holding guns and pointing guns at cameras. So here was a kid who was, going down a bad path. And so as a result, he had contact with the law. He had touches with the law. He was arrested and involved with a felony gun charge, an illegal gun charge, was supposed to show up for a hearing on Zoom, and didn't show up. As a consequence, that left the police with little to no choice. They had to go find him. They found him, and then this unfortunate episode happened. And there's a couple of things to take out of this, of course. Terrible tragedy. No matter what the guy did, he didn't deserve to die in this circumstance, and I feel terribly for him and his family. It would be nice if he hadn't had a connection to the law, but that's not really the point here. It's a shame that he didn't die. By the same token, the female officer who was involved in this incident, has resigned. She said that she thought she'd pulled her taser, and I think the body cam video supports that, because she thinks she was yelling out, "Taser, clear, clear, clear," and then she shot and her gun went off. And I have, as I mentioned yesterday, this came up with the Oscar Grant killing in Oakland some years ago. The Bard police officer, Miserly, shot him in the back while he was on the ground and was stunned when he did it because he didn't realize he was holding his gun in his hand, and he thought he was holding his taser. So apparently this happens, and I think just being prudent and sitting back and being patient and letting the legal process take its course is really the smart thing to do here. But some people, unfortunately, can't do that. One of those people is Barack Obama. Can you pull that tweet up? Barack Obama was pointed as being a wonderful speaker and a statesman, and doing great things for the country. And here he is putting out stuff like garbage like this. Let me pull this up. I'm going to read this to you real quick. I don't want to read the whole thing. I don't want to bore you with it, but it's really despicable what he did here. So he has a whole statement, but in his tweet he says, "Our hearts are heavy over yet another shooting of a black man, Daunte Wright, at the hands of police. It's important to conduct a full and transparent investigation, but this is also a reminder of just how badly we need to reimagine policing and public safety in this country." People who've been in leadership positions, you expect a little bit more from. This guy was the president of the United States. And yet he had to point out that Daunte Wright was black. And there's a dispute. I mean, there's a dispute maybe, or they're going to figure out, they have to do an investigation to find out, what happened, why she pulled her trigger, was it an error? Was this an act of malevolence? Really going to be hard to prove that case. The fact that she's wearing a body cam and all the other police officers would indicate that she wouldn't commit a felony crime on camera, knowingly on camera. It's going to be a really difficult case to prove. But to bring up his race is completely and utterly loathsome, as I mentioned in a tweet earlier today. Because one thing we know for sure that hasn't been established is that this young man's race had nothing to do, it has not been established that this man's race had anything to do with the reason why he was shot. It has not been established that it has anything to do with this. And for a former president of the United States, an African-American man who was elected twice to office by the majority of people in this country, for him to say that is utterly and completely despicable. All he's doing, as I also mentioned in my tweet earlier today, was add kerosene to the fire. This is disgraceful. He should be roundly rejected for this and called out for what he's saying. It's despicable for him to do this, and I'm sorry to say, not completely, unexpected. It's the sort of thing that he does. He and his wife are two peas in a pod. I had took the unfortunate bait of reading a majority of her Princeton thesis, which Michelle Obama's, which is an exercise in not only narcissism, but also, looks like it was written by a sixth grader. I'm not sure, as Christopher Hitchens said, he's not sure what language it was written in because it was unfamiliar to him, even though it was purportedly to be in English. But it was largely about her experience as a black woman in an Ivy League school, which is just such a wonderful, unbelievable metaphor of complete and utter narcissism. She's making herself a victim while she's attending an Ivy League school. Okay, and Obama, the president himself, set aside his wife, but Obama himself was, as I said, elected president of the United States twice, and yet still wants to, and it had every opportunity, mind you, to move into what they call the post-racial America, and actually took every opportunity he could practically to continue to foment discord and division in the country. And he really shouldn't be. I wouldn't want to talk to the guy. I think in polite society he ought to be called out to the carpet and should be made to apologize for everything he's done, like this instance, to create racial division in this country. It's utterly and completely despicable. Okay, so there's that angle. This whole thing is really just completely, all of this discord is driven by the left. None of this stuff exists in the Republican side of the aisle, Republicans want the country to prosper. They want every corner of the country to prosper, every group. They don't think in terms of these kinds of groupings. But that's what they want. So you have the problem of when incidents like these happen, the opportunists, the race opportunists will jump in, take advantage of it. But the whole problem could be caused by another leftist identity thing too, which is that we have to have quotas for different types of people working in institutions like policing. So go ahead and pull up that tweet from Paul Joseph Watson. I'm going to play this. I want you to really hear this. This is so critical. I'm going to be in control of this, Mario. Okay, so it's up and ready. Folks, I want you to hear this. This is something that Paul Joseph Watson posted this morning. You know who he is. He's involved with Prison Planet, but has his own thing going on. And his tweet account is amazing. And he pointed out that this guy Sam Hyde, who I don't know a thing about him, but watch what he said. Listen to what he says and tell me that this doesn't ring true.
If you ever catch the eye of a female cop, hope you wore your bulletproof vest. Hope you got your vest on, man. I'm praying for you, unironically. You ever catch the eye of a female cop? Man, I hope you wore your vest. And I am praying for you, because that gun on her waist at some point is going to accidentally go off. Okay? She's going to draw it out thinking it's a taser. She's going to have her finger on the trigger before she's ready to fire. She's going to do this because you didn't put your hands up fast enough or whatever. Something you did made her feel threatened. You're taller than her. She feels threatened for her life. She's a female. The only recourse she has physically is to shoot you. And I just hope that if you ever get pulled over by a woman, you're wearing a fucking bulletproof vest and a Kevlar helmet.
All right, listen, I'm not a big I try not to curse on this show. I'm not a shrinking violet in that regard, but try not to curse. So just sorry for not warning you about this. But has anybody nailed anything so firmly than this guy just nailed it? He just hit that out of the park. And this is one of the problems with creating this sort of genderless society where everyone has to have a role in everything that we do. Female police officers, for the most part, have to rely on compliance from the people with whom they are interacting. And as a result, because they know they're in a weaker position, they're possibly going to be a little more trigger happy. And that's kind of where we are here. I mean, again, the investigation has to happen. This is we can say that it isn't a common thing that female police officers are shooting people regularly, but it just seemed like kind of a prescient thing given what's happening right now. I don't know when this guy put it out. And by the way, I don't know I probably should have researched this guy, because God forbid, you put something out there from somebody who says something, odious. I don't know a thing about this guy. All I know is what Paul Joseph Watson put up there. And what this guy said is absolutely true. It's a truth. And maybe, female police officers are, take countermeasures to make sure that they are aware of this, and they try and do other things so that they are not quick to pull the trigger. But I don't know, man. It just seems like today, after these last few days and after this shooting, it seems like he was really prescient about that prediction. So we have a problem, and it's all driven. That comment that he made was driven by the need for political correctness in this country, and it's going to lead to I think more incidents. And I haven't quite figured out, I try on this show to come up with constructive solutions. And I am not interested really so much in complaining about everything, although I do want to point out, what's happening and let people know that there are others like us who see what's going on, and we're pushing back. We're aware of it, and we're just pointing it out. We're not going to live in this, I'm not going to hurt your feelings kind of environment. We're going to push back. and speak the truth about these things. But I also try and come up with constructive solutions. And the truth of the matter is, in terms of the long game, I'm not exactly sure how we come out of this. I think it might be a long game. It might be that just eventually people, get wise. We develop a collective wisdom to these kinds of emotional shakedowns, and we have a long way to go. But I don't know what the answer is to this, but I do know that we are going to see more incidents like this, and it's probably going to get a little worse before it gets better. But sooner or later, if we're going to emerge from this, if we're going to defeat this kind of thinking, we have to have sort of a collective reckoning and awareness to the scam that's being pulled over on us. And we have to reject the, this push towards the equality, society, equity and equality of outcome society, because this is leading to destruction, and it's tearing us apart as, the fabric of the country. So anyway, and of course, we're seeing the expected consequences of this, but we're also becoming normalized that we have riots. And I made the not terribly original prediction yesterday that when the Chauvin case is resolved, and it's looking very much like, unless there's some sort of jury nullification against the actual evidence, it's looking very much like he's going to be acquitted of certainly the most serious charges. And you're going to see riots. Not a crazy out there prediction. I'm not the only one saying that. You probably thought of it yourself. But what's also happening now is that there's a riot network out there. There is a network of cities who is, it's been normalized that as soon as something happens, that someone has the opportunity to push a leftist political button, that riots emerge. And so last night we saw Dante riots in riots in Portland, and I would suspect maybe tonight we're going to see them in Seattle, and we might see them in New York, we might see them in Oakland, we might see them in LA, we may see them in Philadelphia, in Washington, D.C., and other places. And I can tell you that all of that is just a warm-up, and the riot network is going to be in prime position, ready to go as soon as the Chauvin case is completely is completed, and as soon as that verdict comes back. So here we go, folks. This is where we are, in this country at this point. Again, there has been no evidence that this was done with malice. There is no evidence that this unfortunate incident with Mr. Wright occurred because of his race, and yet the race baiters and the opportunists are taking advantage of it. And all this is happening in the same week that we learn that the primary founder, certainly the co-founder of Black Lives Matter, has bought over $3 million worth of real estate in the last 6 months. In other words, she's profited from all of this political opportunism and all this anger. So anyway, that's the game. All right, let me move on to the next topic, and it's the final topic. And a lot of people don't really talk very much about this. For me, the war topic is critical. I find it really, really important to discuss, and because it has such short-term and long-term terrible effects on the country, and it's a racket for many in Washington, D.C. who profit from war. We've had an ongoing war, a 20-year war in Afghanistan. And so Donald Trump wanted to pull out all the troops out of Afghanistan. After 20 years, he was pushed back on, even though the president supposedly controls foreign policy. He was pushed back on by the various interests in Washington, D.C., who have a hand in what's happening there. So in terms of war, and the position that we should be there is so ridiculous and completely untenable that even now, Joe Biden has to fulfill Donald Trump's promise. Donald Trump said that we would be out of Afghanistan in May. The Biden administration, even though I think they would like to stay there, they realize that it's not politically tenable to continue to do that. So the remaining 2,500 troops are going to be withdrawn from Afghanistan. According to the Biden administration, they're going to extend the exit to the symbolic September 11th complete drawdown of all troops and withdrawal of all troops from Afghanistan. Now, a couple things about that. One, of course, it should have happened a lot sooner. We shouldn't have been there for 20 years. And this is something that was pointed out by the BBC. So let me just make this point. As most people know, poppy is a huge crop in Afghanistan. The only redeeming thing probably about the Taliban is that they weren't interested in the drug trade. They found it immoral and they weren't going to deal with it. By the way, don't get me wrong. The Taliban were complete creeps, and the way they treat women is utterly and completely despicable. And it's an authoritarian crew and despicable people, but they weren't interested in the poppy/heroin trade. Ever since we have been in Afghanistan, the United States has seen an increase in the uptake and the abuse of opioids, and that might have something to do with the fact that the supply has come out of Afghanistan in record numbers. So all of a sudden, for decades, there was no opioids coming out of Afghanistan, and now there's a lot of it, and all of a sudden they're flooding American streets. So maybe there's a connection. I don't know. The BBC seems to think there was. So we'll see what happens with that. I would like to see a second point is that I would have loved to see. Forget the symbolic stuff, because the longer you stay there, the longer there is opportunity for something to happen which compels the president of the United States to keep the troops in Afghanistan, but or any place for that matter. But let's take them at their word for the moment and say that okay, they're going to withdraw. And by the way, if he does in fact pull it off, if he does in fact withdraw, I will praise Biden and and even thank him for finally doing that. But the last point is that there are still other troops in there. There are special forces operations going on connected to the intelligence agencies in the country. And there has been no mention of those people. The truth is that while they're on the record 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, the reality is probably somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 total. And there has been no mention about what's going to go on with those special operations and connections to the intelligence agencies. Now, I'm not thrilled about leaving them anywhere, but I will say that at one point I did make the argument that was probably, if they were really concerned that this country, this vacuum of a country, this void of a country was vulnerable to creating training camps for terror operations, you could keep a small skeleton crew on the ground and use other, spy satellites and other sources and methods to find out if these camps were being reconstituted and become a danger specifically or generally to the West and specifically to the United States. I don't think they're necessary, that they should be there, but the problem is that even the argument that they will that they should stay there, as long as you have one American troop, special forces operation person there, intelligence agent there, the longer you have somebody there, the more opportunity you have for something bad to happen to those people and for an escalation to occur. And so my druthers at this point, if we're pulling out the troops, I'd like to pull them all out. Get the special forces guys out of there. Use networks. For our intelligence agencies can use their local sources to determine if there is the reconstitution of any of these nutcase terrorist operations being reconstituted. But that's what we should do. We shouldn't have a single soul on the ground there. We can't afford afford it. We're out of money. We're borrowing money to continue operations like that. But more importantly, the longer you stay there, the more opportunity there is for an incident to flare up that drags us right back in. So anyway, listen, if it happens, I'll be thankful. I'll be grateful that somebody did it. I'll give appropriate kudos to Joe Biden for actually pulling it off. But I'm still a little skeptical about what's going on there, and I'm looking forward to that September 11th deadline passing without incident, so that we can at least withdraw those 2,500 troops that remain in Afghanistan. So, and hopefully let that be an example that would lead us to withdraw our troops from other places like Syria, Yemen, any of the other places around the world where we are engaged, and leave us vulnerable to an escalation of difficulties that would cause us to lose life and treasure. So anyway, with that note, let me just end this with this today. So we're going to start putting out tweets reminding people about our live streams. They will come out Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at 2 p.m. on the West Coast, 5 p.m. on the East Coast. We were using Periscope as our primary distribution method platform for the live streams. We're going to use now YouTube. So please go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube at the John Dennis Report. And second, let me see if there are any comments. Tons of comments here. If we can go ahead and subscribe to the John Dennis Report on YouTube, that would be great. You can also subscribe to the John Dennis Report on Facebook, and then our at Real John Dennis on Twitter and Instagram is the handle on those two platforms, at Real John Dennis. Please subscribe. Look forward to seeing you again. Look forward to sharing some other little bits with you over the next couple of days. So please go ahead and subscribe again at John Dennis Report on YouTube, and we'll send you some new content, and then we'll see you live on Thursday. Actually, I take that back. A little announcement. On Thursday, we'll actually have a pre-recorded session. I can't do it on Thursday. We'll have something new and fresh organized by Thursday morning, and then be live again on Monday. Have a great couple of days. We'll see you soon.